After 15 years at Dalton and Brooks Financial, I had long stopped keeping track of the countless early mornings and late nights. I had poured my soul into this company, mentoring others, putting in extra hours, fixing the mistakes of others, and staying loyal even during tough financial times. But as I sat in that sleek, glass-walled conference room on a cold Friday morning, all that effort seemed meaningless. Seated across from me was Amanda Price, the newly appointed CEO, barely in her mid-30s. Beside her were Richard, the detached HR manager, and Kevin, my direct supervisor, whose smirk suggested a satisfaction that made my stomach churn. Amanda's tone was calm, yet distant, almost rehearsed. "Kathy, thank you for joining us. I'll get straight to the point. As part of our restructuring, your position has been made redundant." Redundant. The word echoed through my mind like a sharp slap. I knew this company like the back of my hand, from the legacy accounting systems to the personalities of our most important clients. But I stayed composed, folding my hands neatly in my lap. I learned years ago that showing emotion in these moments was a losing battle. Before I could speak, Kevin leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "We're just clearing out the dead weight, Kathy," he said, his tone almost casual. Richard flinched but kept silent. Amanda didn't even blink. From the corner of the room, Emma, a young analyst who'd only been with us for 2 years, offered a hesitant comment. "Don't take it personally, Kathy. It's just business." Her voice was awkward, almost apologetic, but the sting of her words still cut deep. I smiled, my heart pounding beneath the neatly pressed fabric of my blazer. "No problem," I said, my voice steady, watching the surprise flicker across their faces. They'd expected resistance, maybe even tears, but what they didn't know was that I had been anticipating this moment for weeks. 3 weeks earlier, I had stumbled upon an internal email thread that I was never supposed to see, a forwarded message that had been carelessly sent to me after hours. The thread laid out Amanda and Kevin's plan to modernize the company by eliminating senior staff under the guise of restructuring. And I was on a chopping block. Since then, I had quietly prepared, strategically, with patience. Amanda slid a manila folder toward me. "Inside, you'll find your severance terms. We'll need your key card, laptop, and phone by the end of the day. Your team will be informed this afternoon." My team, 12 talented people I had personally hired and nurtured. They were more like family to me. Many of them still leaned on me for professional, and sometimes personal, advice. The thought of leaving them behind hurt more than losing my position. "I understand," I said, taking the folder but not opening it. "Thank you for the opportunity." Amanda nodded, her attention already shifting to the next item on the agenda. Kevin's smirk deepened, and Richard continued to scribble notes in his HR notebook. Only Emma, who avoided my gaze, seemed to sense that something wasn't quite right. As I left the conference room, I passed by the main boardroom where Amanda's carefully chosen executives were already preparing for their leadership retreat. Their laughter behind the glass walls sounded hollow. I could almost picture Kevin boasting about how he had finally gotten rid of me. I entered my office, locked the door behind me, and then pulled out my personal phone. I sent a quick, deliberate text. "It's happening. End of day today." The reply came instantly. "Perfect. Ready when you are. Dinner tonight?" I exhaled slowly, the tension in my shoulders easing. Tonight, I would meet with someone who had been waiting for this moment. Someone who valued what Amanda, Kevin, and the others had overlooked. I glanced at my desk calendar. It was Friday. I'd walk out of Dalton and Brooks today. But Monday? Monday would be interesting. And they had no idea. I arrived at Lawn, an understated yet elegant restaurant on the other side of town, far enough from the corporate district to avoid any curious eyes. The dim lighting, polished wood, and soft jazz playing in the background made it the perfect setting for a discreet conversation. "Over here," a familiar voice called softly from a corner booth. I smiled and walked over, sliding into the seat across from Jonathan Pierce, the CEO of Silverus Capital, Dalton and Brooks' fiercest competitor, and a man with whom I had quietly maintained a professional relationship for years. He stood slightly as I sat, ever the gentleman, before settling back into his seat and signaling the waiter. "They finally did it, huh?" Jonathan said, pouring me a glass of wine. "They did," I replied, "exactly as we thought they would." His eyes gleamed with satisfaction. Kevin's arrogance was always his downfall. And Amanda, I had a feeling she'd make this move as soon as she took Victor's place. Victor had been the previous CEO. Despite his flaws, he had always recognized my contributions. His sudden retirement 6 months ago marked the beginning of Amanda's rapid rise and the slow, calculated marginalization of senior staff. I had held on for a while, but I could see where this was going. I didn't want to believe they'd actually do it, I admitted, swirling my wine in my glass. But once I found that email chain, I knew it was over. Jonathan leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. I've already had our legal team go over everything. You're clear, Kathy, Jonathan said, his voice steady. The updates you made to the client portfolio system over the past year, those late nights you put in at home. We have irrefutable proof that you did that work on your personal time, using your own equipment. The tightness in my chest eased. They underestimated me, I muttered. They always have. Jonathan chuckled softly. They see age and think complacency. They have no idea that you've been quietly building something far superior to anything Amanda's leadership could ever come up with. I reached into my handbag and pulled out a thin folder, sliding it across the table to him. Inside were copies of the updated algorithms, efficiency reports, and a preliminary patent application, all bearing my name. Over the past year, I had been fine-tuning Dalton and Brooks' most crucial client management software. But I had done it off the clock, on weekends, late at night, without anyone knowing. Every enhancement, every update was documented, time-stamped, and completely mine. Jonathan's eyes scanned the documents and he let out a low whistle of appreciation. You've outdone yourself. Silverus could leave them in the dust within a quarter. I nodded. That's just the beginning. I've also got my team's loyalty. They've seen how Amanda and Kevin treated me, and they're not sticking around once I'm gone. They've already said they follow me anywhere. Jonathan leaned back, visibly impressed. You're offering me not just a system, but the team who knows it inside and out. I shrugged modestly. They're great people. They deserve more than what Dalton and Brooks has become. The waiter arrived with our meals, but neither of us reached for the food immediately. There was too much at stake to focus on anything but the conversation. When can you start? Jonathan asked, getting straight to the point. I'll take the weekend to regroup, I replied, feeling a bit lighter. But I'm ready. And so is my team. Jonathan grinned. Perfect. Monday, we announce your new role as Silverus Director of Strategic Innovation. We'll play it carefully, but the message will be clear. I could already picture Amanda's reaction when she saw the news. There's one more thing, I said, leaning forward. I've already prepared transition documents. I'll leave them behind. Every procedure, every password, every project outline. It'll seem like I'm leaving out of courtesy, but without me and without my team, they'll realize just how much I've held everything together. Jonathan raised his eyebrows. Poetic. Strategic, I corrected him. I'm not after revenge. I want recognition, and I want my team protected. We clinked glasses to seal the deal, and a wave of calm confidence washed over me. The plan was in motion. Amanda, Kevin, and the others thought Friday was the end of my story. They had no idea it was only the beginning. Monday morning felt different as I walked into the office. The usual sounds of printers whirring, keyboards tapping, and quiet conversations were still there, but beneath it all, I could sense the gossip. News of my departure had already spread. As I walked through the hallways, I passed a few colleagues who offered sympathetic smiles or quick glances before returning to their work. Emma, the young analyst from Friday's meeting, lingered near the break room, clearly wanting to say something but unsure of how. I gave her a subtle nod as I walked past, heading to my office. The box I had started packing on Friday sat on my desk, surrounded by framed family photos, awards, and little trinkets from conferences. It all reminded me of how much time I had poured into this place. But what struck me most was the silence. None of the executives came by. Kevin didn't even have the decency to check in. For all their bravado on Friday, they couldn't even be bothered to say goodbye. I spent the morning carefully organizing every project I had touched, not because they deserved it, but because I knew exactly what I was doing. Every file, every process, every password was documented meticulously, an intricate gift that would leave them lost without the context that only I and my team fully understood. By noon, the awkwardness in the office had reached its peak. My team, every single one of them, came by my office, one at a time. They pretended to bring me files or ask procedural questions, but I knew what they were really doing. They wanted to say goodbye. More importantly, they wanted to know if there was more to the story. Miguel, my most trusted developer, closed the door softly behind him. Is it true? You're just leaving, after everything? I smiled gently. Not exactly. He raised an eyebrow, waiting for more. Check your personal email tonight, I said, standing to shake his hand. Trust me. He hesitated, then nodded. We'll miss you. All of us. They'll try to keep things going, but without you. He trailed off, shaking his head. It won't be the same. That's their problem now, I said with a wink. Later that afternoon, Richard from HR arrived with his clipboard in hand. He conducted my exit interview in the most detached manner possible, rattling off policy after policy and sliding a non-disclosure agreement in front of me like it was just another form. You understand that all work created during your employment remains the property of Dalton and Brooks, he recited flatly. I signed with emphasis. Of course, anything created during my employment. I spoke slowly, emphasizing my words. Anything I created with company resources belongs to Dalton and Brooks, I said, letting the caveat hang in the air. Richard, too busy with his checklist, missed the implication. And you confirm you have no proprietary information? He asked, glancing up from his clipboard. I haven't taken anything that belongs to the company, I replied, staying truthful. With the formalities behind me, I gathered the last of my belongings, sealing the box with tape. Before stepping out of my office for the final time, I paused and took in the sight of the space, empty now, save for the memories. The chair where countless colleagues had come for advice or support. It was all coming to an end. Leaving already? Kevin's voice broke through my thoughts. I turned to see him leaning against the doorway, trying to look casual but radiating arrogance. His tie was undone, his posture too relaxed to hide his smugness. Well, he said, his voice laced with mock indifference. Don't let the door hit you on the way out. You had a good run, Kathy, but the company needs fresh blood. No hard feelings. He gave a dismissive shrug, as if I were just another employee. I smiled faintly, keeping my emotions in check. No hard feelings at all. You'll probably enjoy retirement, Kevin added, half joking. Maybe take up gardening or something. I locked eyes with him, my voice low. Oh, I'm not retiring. I've already lined up my next position. Starts Monday. Kevin blinked, visibly thrown off. Oh? A leadership role, I added, stepping past him into the hallway. One that I'm really excited about. He chuckled awkwardly, but I didn't stay for the conversation. Holding the box, I walked straight out of the building, leaving behind 15 years of memories, of late nights, and most of all, people who had underestimated me. I wasn't just walking away from Dalton and Brooks. I was stepping toward something far more fulfilling. And Monday? Oh, Monday would be very interesting. That Monday, I woke up early, not to rush to the office where I'd spent so much of my life, but to stand by the window, coffee in hand, watching the sunrise over the city. It felt like freedom, a feeling I hadn't experienced in years. By 8 a.m., the announcement had gone live. I refreshed the Silverus Capital website, and there it was, bold and undeniable. Silverus Capital announces Kathy Bennett as Director of Strategic Innovation. Exclusive rights secured for revolutionary client portfolio system. It wasn't just a new title. It was a declaration of ownership over the very system Dalton and Brooks relied on. The press release made it clear. I had developed the updated system in my own time, using my own resources. Silverus' plans to roll out the technology promised to leap ahead of the competition. I knew Amanda, Kevin, and Richard were reading it right then. Moments later, my phone buzzed. 9:12 a.m. Emma, Kathy, what's happening? There's chaos here. I smiled quietly to myself. 9:17 a.m. Miguel. They just called an emergency exec meeting. Amanda looks like she's seen a ghost. I sent a simple response. Check your personal email. I had sent out personal offers to my entire team over the weekend. Every developer, analyst, and coordinator who had supported me unnoticed for years. Silverest had senior roles waiting for them, with better pay, better benefits, and most importantly, real recognition. By 10 a.m., the news spread fast. Industry blogs were calling it the Bennett coup. LinkedIn was buzzing, and Dalton and Brooks clients were starting to panic, and so was Dalton and Brooks themselves. At 10:30 a.m., a number I knew well flashed across my phone. Amanda. I answered, my tone calm. Hello, Amanda. Kathy, she said, her voice tight but controlled. There's been a misunderstanding. We need to talk about the intellectual property you took with you. I couldn't help but chuckle softly. Amanda, I said still sweetly, I didn't take anything that belongs to Dalton and Brooks. What I developed on my own time, with my own resources, belongs to me. You'll find it clearly outlined in the employment agreement, Section 14, if I recall. There was a long pause. Let's be reasonable, she tried again. We're willing to negotiate. Can you come in this afternoon? Oh, Amanda, I said with a smile, I'm booked solid this week, but I'm sure our legal teams will have plenty to discuss. I ended the call before she could respond. 10:45 a.m., Miguel. It's pandemonium. Kevin's screaming at it to pull every server. Amanda's locked in her office. Half the team is asking me if they should start job hunting. I replied, they won't have to look far. By noon, almost everyone on my old team had confirmed they were on board. Even Emma, who had been unsure before, replied, if you'll have me, I'd be honored. Silverus' legal team was already fielding licensing inquiries from Dalton and Brooks' top clients. They could either pay handsomely to license the system or try to rebuild it from scratch, something I knew would take years and millions they couldn't afford. By lunchtime, Dalton and Brooks' stock had dropped 6%. Investors hated uncertainty, and this was the definition of it. Meanwhile, Silverus shares were on the rise as rumors spread about upcoming client migrations. My phone vibrated again. This time it was Kevin. Kathy, he said, trying to sound calm, listen, we need to talk. Maybe we were hasty the other day. We might be able to find a role for you again. I almost laughed. Kevin, I appreciate the offer, but I think you'll have your hands full. I said calmly. You can't do this, he spat. You're burning bridges. No, I replied softly. I'm simply walking across one you didn't even notice me building. With that, I ended the call and reclined in my chair. Emails from my former team continued to flood in, each one more eager than the last to join me. Kevin, Amanda, and Richard thought Friday had marked the end of the story. But it wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of a long, uncomfortable week for Dalton and Brooks, and the best was yet to come. By Tuesday morning, the cracks in Dalton and Brooks had widened into gaping holes. Industry blogs were analyzing every aspect of the situation. Financial analysts were speculating on the company's fate, and clients were quietly discussing the possibility of moving their business to Silverest. I sat in Silverest's conference room, sunlight pouring through the floor-to-ceiling windows, surrounded by my new colleagues, and more importantly, my old team. Miguel, Emma, and the others were more energized than I had seen them in years. You really pulled it off, Miguel said, shaking his head as we prepared for our first project meeting. I still can't believe it. Believe it? I replied, and let's make sure it was worth it. Jonathan walked in, nodding toward me. The fallout is worse than we expected, he said. 3 of Dalton and Brooks's biggest clients have already contacted us to renegotiate terms. They're jumping ship. I wasn't surprised. The clients had relied on the system I built, and losing the stability it provided was enough to drive them to Silverest. Contractual obligations be damned. By mid-morning, my phone lit up with a message from David, an old friend still at Dalton and Brooks. Emergency board meeting. Kevin's pacing like a madman. Amanda hasn't spoken a word since Monday. Richard looks like he's aged 10 years overnight. I forwarded it to Jonathan, who chuckled. I almost feel bad for them. Almost, I replied. Later that day, Denise, one of Dalton and Brooks's senior clients, reached out to set up a lunch meeting. Denise and I had worked together for over a decade, and I knew this wasn't just a friendly catch-up. At a quiet restaurant, she got straight to the point. We've depended on you more than you know, she said. Amanda's team has no idea how to manage the portfolio system without you. Honestly, we don't trust them anymore. I reassured her. We'd love to continue our partnership through Silverest. Denise leaned back, clearly relieved. I'll get it pushed through on our end. When I returned to the Silverest office, Jonathan was waiting with a fresh stack of reports. More clients lining up, he said. Dalton and Brooks is hemorrhaging. I glanced at the list of client names. Many were relationships I had personally cultivated over the years. This wasn't just about taking business from Dalton and Brooks, it was about protecting the people I had worked so hard for. ensuring their stability when Amanda and Kevin had left them vulnerable. Around 3 p.m., I received another text from David. Rumor has it Kevin's blaming Amanda. Amanda's blaming Richard. The board is furious. They're discussing leadership changes. I replied simply, expected. By Wednesday morning, Dalton and Brooks's stock had dropped 15%, triggering panic among shareholders. Several employees had already reached out to me privately, asking if Silverus was hiring. The ship was sinking, and they knew it. But the real turning point came at 11 o'clock a.m., when Dalton and Brooks's general counsel, accompanied by 2 senior executives, called Silverus' legal team to request a formal meeting. They're ready to talk, Jonathan said. They know they're cornered. They want licensing, I said, calm as ever. But they'll want it cheap and quiet. I'm sure, Jonathan grinned. But that's not what they're getting. Our legal team had prepared non-negotiable terms. A hefty licensing fee, retroactive to cover previous use, and a public acknowledgement of my sole authorship of the system. I knew it would sting more than the financial loss, having to admit publicly that the woman they had dismissed as dead weight was the one who had built the very foundation of their success. That evening, as I wrapped up my day, Miguel popped into my office. "Did you see the news?" he asked, handing me his phone. There it was. Breaking. Dalton and Brooks board announces sudden executive shakeup. CEO Amanda Price and head of product Kevin Rhodes step down effective immediately. I took a long breath, letting the reality wash over me. After 15 years of loyalty and being discarded like nothing, I had regained not just my dignity, but my value. "How does it feel?" Miguel asked. "Like justice," I replied softly. As the headlines rolled in and congratulatory emails from Silverus executives filled my inbox, I couldn't help but think back to Kevin's words from Friday. Dead weight? I mused to myself. Hardly. And this wasn't over yet. 2 weeks later, I stood in Silverus' main conference room, looking out over the city skyline as the final signatures were inked. The licensing deal was official. Dalton and Brooks had agreed to the terms, though not without resistance. They had agreed to pay the full licensing fees, both retroactive and ongoing, and most importantly, they had publicly acknowledged me as the sole creator of the client portfolio system that had fueled their success for nearly a decade. Jonathan entered the room, grinning widely. "It's done. Congratulations, Kathy. They just published the acknowledgement across all their platforms." "There's no way for them to hide it now," I said with a smile. I let out a deep breath, feeling the weight of the last 15 years finally begin to ease. The announcement was short, but carried undeniable force. Dalton and Brooks officially acknowledges Kathy Bennett as the exclusive creator of the portfolio management system developed during her employment and expresses gratitude for her contributions to the industry. Gratitude. The irony wasn't lost on me. Just weeks ago, I'd been cast aside like an obsolete file folder. Now, they were publicly celebrating me. More importantly, Silvercrest was flourishing. The clients who followed me and my team adapted quickly. Our revamped version of the system, improved with features I had deliberately held back once I sensed Dalton and Brooks turning, was exceeding every expectation. Miguel and Emma appeared at my door. "You'll want to see this," Miguel said, holding out his tablet. I couldn't help but laugh at the headline. Dalton and Brooks faces investor backlash after executive failures. Board scrutinized over patent neglect and talent departure. "The sharks are circling," Emma added dryly. "They'll survive," I replied, crossing my arms. "But not without a few scars." As we headed into the innovation team meeting, I found myself thinking back to the road that had led me here. Amanda's cold indifference, Kevin's arrogance, the board's silent endorsement. They labeled me as outdated, someone who'd lost her edge. But what they failed to grasp was that experience isn't a weakness. Loyalty isn't naive. Real innovation doesn't need to shout. It builds quietly until it can no longer be ignored. After the meeting, my phone rang. I recognized the number instantly, Denise from Dalton and Brooks's legal team. The same woman who had once pushed a severance agreement across the table with forced politeness. "Kathy," she said, her voice lower than usual, "speaking on behalf of those of us still here, I want to personally apologize for how things ended. A lot of us didn't agree with it." I could hear the sincerity in her tone, but also the desperation. I appreciate the call, I said calmly, but we've moved forward. My team and I are right where we need to be. She paused, hopeful. If there's ever an opportunity to work together again. I cut in gently. I think Dalton and Brooks has a bit of soul searching to do first. We ended the conversation on polite terms, but the subtext was loud and clear. They were trying to rebuild a bridge they had set on fire. That evening, as I strolled through the Silvercrest offices, I was struck by how different the energy felt. People listened, really listened. Ideas weren't waved off or watered down. No one rolled their eyes when I spoke. Age wasn't treated like a limitation, but as lived experience, proof of perseverance. My team thrived. They were sharp, fearless, collaborative, no longer weighed down by toxic politics. I passed by the development wing and saw Emma confidently guiding a group through a system demo, her presence magnetic. Miguel stood nearby, nodding in silent encouragement. Watching them shine like this meant more than any executive title or press release ever could. Later, Jonathan joined me near the windows. "You've changed the game," he said, a quiet admiration in his voice. "Maybe," I replied, "but it shouldn't take a rebellion for people to recognize someone's worth." He nodded, thoughtful. "People in the industry are talking, your name's being mentioned in rooms that never used to be." I looked out at the skyline, lights flickering to life as day gave way to dusk. "Good," I said. "Maybe next time someone will think twice before calling experience dead weight." As the sunset painted the city in gold, I let the feeling settle in. It wasn't revenge I felt, it was something better. Satisfaction. Not just for me, but for every overlooked professional who's ever been dismissed as too old, too soft-spoken, too stuck in their ways. I didn't just prove Amanda and Kevin wrong. I reminded an entire industry that integrity, loyalty, and quiet strength aren't signs of weakness. They're power. Thanks for tuning in. Catch you in the next one, and until then, stay inspired.